We're here with Katie McRobert, AFI. Now, you're not, obviously you went on stage just straight away there, Katie. You're coming later on in the day, 3 o'clock with the crew there.
This is a preview of what to expect.
We will have Jared Greenville on after this next session, so we'll have a chat about what we just saw now, maybe then, but we'll just get a feel for what you're going to be talking about when you come on later in the day, Katie.
Thanks, Matt. Well, some of the topics that we will be covering in our fireside chat this afternoon were covered by both Jared and Dr. Torero there, talking about the sustainability of the industry, of course, but again, that social license and what it means for agriculture to operate in a really fast evolving landscape, whether that's environmental expectations, social, economic, geopolitical, all of those things contribute to social license. So we're going to try and unpack some of that this afternoon. 45 minutes is probably not enough. Could use 5 or 6 weeks, to be honest, but we're going to give it a really good shot. And I'll be joined then too by Liz Ritchie from the Regional Australia Institute, who's going to provide that other lens of how these things impact regional economies as well.
Excellent.
Do us a favour. Define social license. What does it actually mean?
Can I?
In basic, you got 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Just
right.
to define.
Let's see how we go. Look, I think people overcomplicate the idea of social license and they see it as some sort of certificate that has to be earned and that can be bartered or traded away. Basically, we're just talking about trust. How much trust does somebody have in the activities that you're doing? So an industry can hold a social license, a commodity can hold a social license, a business can hold a social license. It's really just that unspoken contract between people working together in a community, in this case an economic trading opportunity, that you trust each other and that your expectations are going to be met on both sides. So
it's like an alignment of values
to an extent. It's an alignment of values, absolutely right. So we drive on the left-hand side of the road because there are rules that say we should, but also we all agree.
We drive on the left-hand side of the road because of colonialism.
Because of the, we all agreed that we had to make a decision so that it wasn't just free for all. And I've been in other countries where you don't drive on one side of the road, you drive wherever you want to go, and that's a different kind of social expectation. So it's not about having to kowtow. It's not about having to deliver on anybody else's whims or blowing with the breeze. It's about having trust and transparency so that your customers know that what you do meets their expectations of the right way to behave in an economy.
In a way, it's kind of a bit of a combination between sort of education and marketing. In a way, you're educating your consumers to understand what you do and the reasons why you do those things, and that it's not done out of anything other than...
Look, it can be, but also you can hold a social license without doing much marketing or much education if you already have trust and you can trade on that trust and you don't do anything to break that trust. So bringing it down to just a really basic level, the people that you trust within your friend circle, some of them you trust implicitly and they have to work really hard to break your trust, even if they do things that might go outside the social contract you have in the friendship. It's still something that you're willing to extend them a little bit more trust as you go on. It's the same for agriculture. So agriculture's in Australia in particular, because this is different around the world, but in Australia, farmers are trusted very, very highly. When you look at the profession's ratings that come through, we do trust Australian farmers to, by and large, do the right thing. Nobody wants to hear about the farmers doing the wrong thing because they make everybody look bad, but we have that trust. We've earned it and we hold it. Now, educating people on why you do the things you do is important because that's a transparency. So again, you trust a friend because you know the reasons why they do things. Maybe you don't always agree with what they do, but you understand the reasons. It's the same for an industry social license. If you understand why people are making choices that might not necessarily align with the choices you'd make, but you can see that there's an outcome that you're both striving for, that's how you earn that social license.
Katie, you spoke about the individual and social license and almost a collective of that the community pushes their own as individuals, but are there also elements of whether it's industry or whether it's people within positions of leadership, they might be politicians, they could be representatives of sectors, like are they or even influencers, I guess, in a modern setting, are they the drivers of what becomes social license, or is it really a collective thing, or are there actually individuals that help shape the direction and lead the way for everyone else?
That's a pretty good question because there are outstanding examples of individuals who have helped to build trust in Australian agriculture. Fiona Simpson is my favourite example to bring up as somebody who is a very strong leader who didn't always respond to everything the farming sector asked her to respond to, but instead said we need to take leadership in, for example, addressing climate change. At a time when climate change was an unpopular political football that was being kicked around a lot, Fiona said the industry is facing existential challenge here. We need to get our house in order and we need to show leadership. And if you're not with me, then I'm going that way anyway. So that kind of leader can build social license and build trust, because when other people outside the industry see somebody like that taking positive leadership that reflects their own values, then they're going to build up that trust bank, if you like. So think of it as a bank too, that you can put deposits in, you can withdraw from, but if you withdraw too far, then there it goes. So when people speak out to undermine those kinds of, I guess, shared values across the community, that is really corrosive, and it sometimes just takes one person to undo decades of work. The saying, it's well worn, but it's very apt, that trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. It is really a slow game to build trust, and you can just shatter that overnight with one really poorly thought through, divisive comment. And we do see that happening around agriculture at the moment. It's really, really frustrating.
I can't believe that.
Built that social capital up, and then we have people out there who, for their own purposes, whether it's personal gain, political gain, or to further their organisational needs, it's hard sometimes to tell what the motive might be, who are speaking out very divisively and corroding the trust that Australian agriculture has fought to build over the past few decades.
I suppose that's the thing with, you've got social licence and you've got social media. In the past, let's talk 20 years ago, individuals didn't have a voice, or they didn't have a loud voice, but now there's millions of individual voices, and some of them can get louder and louder. So I suppose that is the biggest challenge to social licence, is bad actors, I guess, in effect.
Yeah, it is, but I mean, it depends. I think social media does have an impact on trust and on social licence. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. I remember working in media 15 years ago, and we were all very, very concerned about the impact of social media and how it would change absolutely everything. It's changed a lot, and there's a great deal more misinformation and disinformation around now than there was 20 years ago. But there's not more than there was 100 years ago. It used to be quite common, for example, for mainstream media to just publish absolute rubbish. There weren't standards the way that we would expect, at least in Australia, that we have certain standards that we would hold traditional media to. Social media doesn't follow those same standards, so you do have a lot of rubbish going around, and there's that echo chamber effect where algorithms and people and bad actors will amplify unhelpful and divisive messages. Whether or not that has a very strong impact on social licence and trust overall, I haven't seen a lot of evidence to suggest that it does. It has an effect, but it's not the thing that will bring social licence down.
So today we've heard about the $100 billion target, and so I think it's a good way of having a target that you can achieve. There's obviously discussions around what that target should be in the future and what it should have been originally. But keeping a target and having reviews of it allows you to actually assess success. What are the metrics to determine whether our push for a social license is actually successful or not? Like, how do we actually determine whether the industry, let's say we say the sheep industry, like how do we determine that the sheep industry has a social license?
That's a tricky one, isn't it? And it's not something the Farm Institute has done much work on in the past couple of years, but we're live now. There we go. So
We're live all the way through. I just decided to put it on.
Hi, everybody. So the Farm Institute did some work on this a few years ago, but in the more recent times, AgriFutures is doing a lot of work on community trust, and Viconic has been doing a great deal of work on being able to measure that and have some impact. So if you can find Courtney Bailey around for Viconic, I'm not sure if she's here, but she'll be able to speak on those impact measures with more detail. But yes, we can see just in the outcomes that are happening of whether or not an industry is holding or losing a social licence. And live export is a classic case, right? So live sheep export in particular, the industry acted as if this was an enormous surprise to them. The live sheep export ban, for want of a better word, came into play. The Labor government was not shy about saying what they intended to do.
That's been for a number of elections.
It has been for numbers of elections, and the 2011 overturn of the cattle industry exporting to live cattle to Indonesia was the wake-up call the industry needed, and then it ignored ignore is too strong a word. I know some people who've worked very hard over the past couple of decades to try and bring that back into focus. But when that ban was then overturned and the live cattle trade resumed, the industry behaved as if that was a blip, as opposed to a really, really strong signal that community sentiment had changed around a certain practice. Now, it's always hard when change happens and it's not the change you wanted to see, and it's not the change that you're backing, and it's not what you're invested in, especially if you've got a long history in something and you're proud of what you do. None of us like to see that. But the bottom line is that's how jobs work. That's how the economy works. I have no certainty that my job will still be around in 6 months' time or 6 weeks' time, because who knows whether or not people still want to invest in what I do.
Yep.
So I've got to keep earning my social license to operate as a policy advisor on a weekly basis. All of us do, and things do change. So if you think about what we consider acceptable today, about things we can say, words we can use in everyday conversation, that 20 years ago in the schoolyard were very common to hear, maybe more than 20 years ago, which we would absolutely not tolerate at a dinner table today. And that change is because society's expectations changed. That's not a bad thing, it's just the way things go. And if I hear one more person in agricultural leadership talk about a woke agenda, I am going to have to just
well, that's a question I was going to ask. Generally speaking, as a broad base, I know you've done a lot of work in that advocacy, ag space, the representative space. As a general rule, are the leaders in those spaces doing the right thing, or have we got a lot more work to do in that space?
We've got a lot more work to do in that space a lot more work. So there has been this very strong pushback against what people are calling, I'm going to use the air quotes, a woke agenda. There's no such thing as a woke agenda. People's minds change on things. Sometimes you agree with the change, sometimes you disagree with the change, but you need to understand that society's expectations change. They change fairly frequently. There's no such thing as a static expectation of what is acceptable and not acceptable. It doesn't mean that agriculture just blows with the wind every time a change comes through, but it does mean that we need to understand, well, why are people changing? Why do we now use different terms to describe people? Why do we now have different expectations about a kind of practice in agriculture even that was acceptable 30 years ago and is not acceptable today? And we evolve. That's what we do.
How much of that, Andrew mentioned before about the social media aspect as well, and how much of that it is, you have to work to be diverse in your social media as well, and the networks that you build there, as you do with your normal real networks with real people. How damaging is it if you're in that kind of echo chamber of social media where you are just hearing maybe one narrative or a particular line, to then understanding fully some of those broader societal changes you just spoke about of how things have moved on?
I like the fact that you picture as work on your social media to make sure you get that diversity. I think most people don't. Most people
want to talk to the same people.
They do want to talk to the same people. That's why they're on social media. They're looking for affirmation. They're looking for connection.
Confirmation bias.
It's like the footy team. If you're a Glasgow Rangers fan, you go to a pub that's full of Glasgow Rangers fans.
So you would expect on social media that you would see an amplification of your own views. That's how the system is set up to operate from a very sophisticated technical level all the way through to the actual social engineering level. That's how that works. So you can't look at social media and say, see, I was right, because all the people around me are saying that I was right. That's just not how that works. Social media is a great tool for connecting people, especially in a geographically diverse country like this. It's just not a place where ideas should be debated and understood. And the fact that there are people who are playing on the fear. So we heard today from ABARES that we're hitting $101 billion just for agriculture this year, 107 if you include fisheries and forestry as well. That makes it sound like the industry is doing incredibly well. We've had droughts, we've had floods, we've had geopolitical disruption, all of those things, and yet we're going to hit this target out of the park well before the year that it was set to be hit in. However, if you looked at the ABARES graphs on farm profitability, there is enormous squeeze on farm profitability, and the gains in that growth in GVP are not being reflected at farm gates. People are feeling that pressure. They are hit time and time again by flood, bushfire, drought, trade disruption, all of those things, as well as profitability squeeze. Inputs are getting more costly. Cost of living goes up for everyone, not just the people who are buying the food, but also the people producing the food. And so they get defensive and they get angry, and there are people out there who are very happy to prey on that anger and to whip up a defensiveness to further their own gains by making things divisive. It's us versus them. There is no us and them. We're all in this together. People growing the food, people buying the food, people helping trade the food along that system.
It's all supply chain. So here's a final question. For anyone wanting to know, the word woke actually comes from people describing the right wing, not the left wing, but it's been co-opted. Question is, you mentioned live sheep export as having probably one of the biggest challenges in social license. So that's being phased out over the next 2 years. What is the next industry that has the biggest social license challenge in agriculture?
See, if I say that on air, then people are going to come and say,
it's just the three of us.
And a few 100 other people online who are listening. Look, there are a couple of parts of Australian agriculture that they're aware and they're not working really fast enough to get ahead of their social licence challenges. Producing food is a messy business. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to call out a particular industry. I've got a couple at the top of my mind, but I don't want to be held to account by the meat and sheep wheat watchers audience. But yeah, if you think, for example, about intensive industries in particular, there's a lot of stuff that goes on
and the transport side of that as well, because they are out in the public view. So I think that could be a
intensive
potential
industries have been in the
pinch point.
spotlight for activists for a long time, and for good reason. There have been practices in the past that were really unacceptable. There are still practices out there that most people, if they're more aware of what happened in some of those intensive industries, would be unhappy to hear about that. But it is part of what you spoke about before, Andrew, about the education, about explaining if you want these things on the table, we do need to make certain trade-offs, and we try to make them in Australian agriculture in the most humane and responsible way that we can, the most moral way that we can.
And I liken it back to when Matt and I used to own the pig farm, taking my father to the pig farm. Father is a city boy, he's a builder, and him seeing a pig euthanized, it was horrific for him. But for us, it's still horrific. But for people outside of agriculture, out with the industry, they're going to experience it in a different way from what we experience. What is reality for people in our industry is not reality for somebody living in Melbourne CBD or even living in the centre of Wagga, to be honest.
We once offered to my nephew, who was very young at the time, so he can be excused, but would you like to come down with us to our friend's farm and see the cow being butchered, so that you know where your dinner's going to be coming from tonight? I said, oh, that sounds terrible. Can't I just go to the shop and get it from there? And there is that lack of understanding about how it gets from point A to point Z. But we do need to be transparent about the choices that are made, and we also do need to be accountable and sometimes look at these choices and say, are they still the right choices in 2026? We've been doing it for 20 years. Is it still the right way to do it? That's what social licence is about. It's about adaptability.
Fabulous way to end. I think that we're going to finish it anyway. It was fabulous to have you on, Katie, and thanks for listening in. We'll be back after the next session with Jared.
Thank you.
Cheers.